Today's Torah portion is Vayishlach, and he sent. And it opens with the story of Jacob about to encounter his brother Esau, sending messengers on ahead to inquire as to what exactly are Esau's intentions. Probably one of the most dramatic parts of this entire story is the actual encounter between Jacob and Esau. And Scripture tells us, this is chapter 33, verse 4. And Esau ran towards him, and he hugged him, and he fell on his neck, and he kissed him, and they cried. Now, the word "and he kissed him" is Vayishlach, and it is in the Masoretic text. There are many dots that are noted on top of the word Vayishlach as a sort of emphasis. It is almost as if it says, look at this word and figure it out what it really means, because there is something interesting hidden here in this word. And indeed, there are many commentators who have noted these dots and trying to understand what exactly they are referring to. Now, there is a very interesting, very ancient tradition that Rashi brings. He quotes Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, and who states, and again, this is a statement that he makes that is quoted and has become a very classic statement in Jewish sources. It is a known fact, he says, that Esau hates Jacob. However, his emotions overpowered him, and at this exact moment in time, he did indeed kiss Jacob with all his heart. Now, a few words of background as to what our sages mean when they talk about it is a known fact that Esau hates Jacob. Esau has come to be identified over time with Europe, with the Christian people, and this actually goes back very, very far back to a time. We know, of course, that Esau's descendants were the nation of Edom to the south of Israel. And we have, for example, in the prophet Obadiah, an entire discussion of the relationship between Esau and Jacob, both during Obadiah's time, when he refers to the great pain suffered by Jacob at the expense of Esau, and most commentators believe that this is referring to the exile after the destruction of the first temple and the beginning of the second temple period, at a time when the Jews are forced from their homes in Judea. It is the people of Edom that come and seize their homes. It is the people of Edom that, in a sense, cheer on the Babylonians as they are causing misery and anguish to the people of Jacob. And of course, at the end of Obadiah, there is a reference to a reversal of these roles, a reversal of the fact that God will actually come and judge the people of Esau and will bring redemption to the people of Jacob, to the people of Israel. Later on, during the Second Temple period, Edom, the Edomites become very closely allied with Rome, and therefore Jewish sources see this Edomites as becoming Rome. Christianity, of course, are the heirs of Rome, and for that reason, over the centuries, very often, in a symbolic way, the enmity that we see here being expressed, and of course in the previous portions, between Esau and Jacob, have been seen as a metaphor for the often extremely hostile and bitter relationships between Christianity and Judaism, or between Rome and Israel, over the years. Now, it's very interesting, in light of this tradition, there is a more modern commentator who lived at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, whose name was known as the Netziv Naftali Tzvi Berlin, and he wrote a commentary as well on the Torah, and says something very, very interesting on this particular verse. First of all, both of them wept, both Jacob And Esau wept, and from the verse it isn't that clear if they both wept, how they wept, etc. But here, the Netziv comes to point out, yes, they both wept. And this comes to teach us that at this moment in time, Jacob also was awakened with a love for his brother Esau. But then the Netziv comes and says something very interesting. And for generations to come, at a time when the descendants of Esau are suddenly awakened with a pure spirit to recognize the children of Israel and their qualities, then we too will be awakened to recognize Esau, that he is our brother. I think this is, as I read this commentary, I am really incredibly amazed, because I don't believe that during the time of the Netziv there was the kind of awakening that we see among Christians all over the world to stand in love and support of Israel. But it is certainly something that we are seeing today. And what the Netziv was referring to then is, if there will come a time, or when there will come a time, when the children of Esau, and as I say, what he's referring to here is clearly the Christian world, when the Christian world will become awakened for its love of Israel, then too Israel will be awakened to love their Christian brothers. And I think this, of course, is a very, very special comment that can be made about the relationships that we have today between Christians and Jews, which is indeed a very, very new phenomenon. I just would like to proceed a little further, though, and take this chapter to its conclusion. At the end of the chapter, at the end of this meeting between Jacob and Esau, Esau invites Jacob to join him and to come back with him to Seir, to Mount Seir, which of course is where he lives, and where he will then found the nation of Edom. And Jacob, in a rather surprising statement, tells him that he will come. He says, the children, he has a great many children and cattle, etc. with him. He says, we're going to take it slowly, but eventually, yes, in our own due time, we will come and we will meet you, which is really actually very surprising. This is chapter 33, verse 14. This is actually very surprising because, first of all, Jacob says it to him in a tone of voice very... he's bowing to Esau. He's saying, I will come to my master Esau. I will almost pay deference to you, my brother, and come to pay you homage in Seir. And it is a very surprising statement for two reasons. Number one, he never does get to Seir. And number two, why this, after the meeting, and it's been a very warm meeting, why then the necessity to continue this posture of deference? Yes, I will bow to you, I will come to you. And actually Rashi here notes something very interesting. He says he never had any intention of coming at this point to Seir. However, this is a prophetic statement, and it refers to the Messianic times, when indeed Jacob will come to Seir. But he quotes, as a proof of this, he quotes the very last verse of Obadiah, which I referred to previously, and that verse reads, and the liberators shall ascend upon Mount Zion to judge the mountain of Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Therefore, what Rashi is essentially saying is that Jacob is ultimately going to come to Esau, not in deference to Esau, but quite the contrary, in victory. I would like to return though to the Netziv and hope and pray that the relationships that we have with the nations will be characterized much more as the relations that have recently developed between the Jewish people and the Christian world, and that will become the pattern for the relationship of Israel with the nations, and the unfortunate pattern that we see between Israel and so many nations all over the world, a negative pattern, that pattern will actually be defeated. And perhaps that is one of the meanings of the final verse in Obadiah, when we will go and judge Seir, that indeed God will reign over the entire world, and the nations will join with Israel, and a relationship will be a positive one rather than a negative one. Shabbat Shalom from Samaria.